So how often do you guys eat out nowadays? Um, with the constantly changing seating rules associated with COVID, eating out has never been more confusing in Hong Kong. One thing that keeps bothering me, though, when I eat out at a local restaurant, is how difficult it is for me to get rid of the straw in my drink. I would politely ask the waiter to not have a plastic drink in my drink, a plastic straw in my drink. The waiter would say yes. Then 2 minutes later, the drink will come with a straw in it. Yeah, you're nodding, so you have experienced it as well. Yeah, it is pretty frustrating. Um, I would try to ask them why it's so hard to do this because customers at local restaurants are tatantang. They request for a lot of stuff, less sugar, no sugar, more sugar, less ice, no ice, and the waiter can do all that for them. But for some reason, the binary request of yes straw and no straw is really difficult to cater to. Usually, what they say is it's really difficult for them to change the years or even decades long habit of putting a straw right into the glass before serving to the customer. Because people rarely ask them to not have a straw in the drink. When there's no big demand for something, the service providers don't feel compelled to change. I think it's fair, although I would expect to be more requests of this kind since this video went viral a couple of years ago. I'm sure you should have seen it or have at least heard of it. A turtle having a plastic straw stuck in its nose. It is impactful. Many conservationists consider this video to be impactful. It's visual and the message was clear. Use less plastic or marine life like the sea turtle will suffer. It elicits empathy from the viewers. However, despite all this, reducing plastic use is still far from getting into mainstream daily habits in Hong Kong. It's still very uncommon to see people bringing their meal boxes for takeaway or to reduce purchasing bottled drinks just for the sake of reducing plastic. And the same seems to be happening across various conservation campaigns as well. Like people know what's good to do for the planet, but they just don't do it. Why? What went wrong? What's missing when we try to deliver our conservation messages to the public? Well, my answer is very obvious. It's just people don't care enough. I'm sure if you guys are willing to spend your Saturday evening at a TEDx event about conservation, you're at least a tiny bit interested in knowing more about animals or saving animals. But let's be real, you also have so many friends who just don't care about animals at all. I have friends who sort of consider all non-human living things to be living in a separate parallel universe, and there's just no need to cross paths with them. I also have friends who kind of consider all cats and dogs to be animals and maybe other mammals by extension. But for the rest of the animals, they just kind of aren't animals to them. So these people, they might be concerned about animal welfare or abuse, but they are not so much interested in ecosystems or wildlife. Unfortunately, this might not be a minority in Hong Kong. Because after all, we all work and live in tall, dense skyscrapers. Nature can feel so distant sometimes, or even not mattering. And this is the problem. When something doesn't matter to you, even though you know that it's probably good to care when you're asked about it, it will never come to your head naturally. What we have been trying to do in most conservation efforts is that we keep telling people to act now, save the planet, let's do this, let's not do that, without caring whether the audience cares or not. While this might not be effective, it may even have adverse effects. Just imagine if I keep telling you not to do something in the name of conservation, while you honestly don't care about it. All you're going to end up thinking in the end is that whatever these messages are, they are annoying, boring, and emotionally blackmailing. Like, why are you giving me moral judgments for something that I don't even care about? Right? Here is a simplified version of the very famous marketing funnel. It depicts how a brand generally markets its product out to its target customers. It starts by spreading awareness of his product so people know of the product. Then hopefully you grow interest in some of the people who are aware of the product. And eventually some of the people who are interested in the product convert to your customers. It gets converted into sales figures. Conservation campaigns should be viewed like a marketing campaign as well because we want to get everybody involved. But what we have been doing is we're kind of subverting this pyramid, this funnel, because we want that conversion so much. We want people to act right now that we miss out on building awareness and interest. But that's very important because conservation relies on everyone's participation. Ideally, every single human being on Earth. Scientists can know all about climate change, the population dynamics of cetaceans, sustainable management practices. But without the public understanding it and supporting conservation efforts in their daily habits, it's really difficult for any changes to happen from bottom up. And it may even slow top-down changes as well. If society in general isn't very much concerned about conservation or ecosystems or wildlife, policymakers have less incentive to push forward eco-friendly regulation, just like how the owners of the restaurants don't feel obliged to change their straw policies. Therefore, that will make lobbying harder. Therefore, it's not enough to get people to know what's good to do. You need to get people to care. I'm a travel show presenter, and my take on how to get people to care is to get people to like it. Because why do we care about animals? It's because we like them. And a couple of years ago, I accidentally came across an opportunity for me to get involved in this. My TV producer back then asked me to plan a travel show on my own. It was my very first travel show. After some pitching, the producer eventually agreed to let me do my show in Central America. And I was so excited. I decided to just put in all the activities that I was interested in into the show. And as an ecology and evolutionary biology major in college, most of those activities were naturally nature related. So here are some of them. Scuba diving in the Great Blue Hole in Belize, cave adventuring in Guatemala, volcano boarding in Nicaragua, and a tree camping in Costa Rica. And there are so many more. Releasing baby sea turtles in the beach, hiking on an active volcano, you name it. I had so much fun. But I also thought, since I'm talking about nature in the show, maybe I should include some messages related to conservation as well, right? I want the audience to have something to take away. But I also try to limit the amount of it because after all, I know it's supposed to be a show primarily for fun and entertainment. And I don't want it to be loaded with a ton of super serious messages. Turns out, the show was fairly positively received, thank God. I got private messages from viewers saying they got inspired by the show to start doing something that they've never tried before. For example, planning their own backpacking journeys in somewhere in the world, or starting to learn scuba diving because they saw me having fun underwater in the show, or even just camping or hiking in Hong Kong, because I was doing all these nature-related activities and it sounded fun to them. It was very rewarding reading those feedback. It's like what I do on one side of the camera has an effect on the audience on the other side. When I feel happy on screen, they feel it too. When they see someone whom they can relate to, enjoying nature-related experiences, they somehow got stimulated to reimagine or to reevaluate their relationship with nature. As I continued to work on the following seasons of my shows, I began to try to actively add more nature-related content to the show because I thought it might be useful, it might be good for the conservation campaign in general. Maybe what I do has more meaning to it than just purely for my personal enjoyment and my living. Maybe this kind of show can help bridge the seemingly unbridgeable gap between the fellow Hong Kongers and nature. Maybe this is what we need in conservation. We should start entertaining with what we know. Well, you might say it's not a groundbreaking idea. You have heard of what wildlife documentaries are, right? I have as well. And there are so many of them out there, and they are of super good quality, and most Hong Kong people would have heard of it as well. However, at least in the context of Hong Kong, wildlife documentaries as a genre is considered quite niche, something that's not meant for the mass audience. In fact, I have encountered a lot of difficulties and resistance when I try to incorporate nature-related content into my show. Most producers would frown upon hearing a show idea that is centered around wildlife and conservation, because wildlife and conservation means wildlife documentaries to them, and documentaries are serious, and serious means tedious. Oftentimes, they would ask to reduce the proportion of nature-related content in the show to a point where it's not even a central theme anymore. It's kind of frustrating, but I guess I get it because you ultimately want people to watch the show, right? While this highlights the marginalization of nature-related content in mainstream media in Hong Kong, it also shows the exact importance, why it's so important to popularize it in our mainstream media so that people see it as less niche. My friend sort of thinks that most animals live in a separate world because animals is something that's niche when they come across it in daily life or is not interesting to them. But we all know that nature shouldn't be niche. We all know that it could be interesting as well. We just need to figure out how to best deliver it. Then how? Unfortunately, I don't have a perfect answer to it. I'm still exploring. I'm just one of the few in Hong Kong who's trying to incorporate nature-related content in mainstream media. However, I did try to figure out what might be important to note. Last year, during the travel ban associated with COVID, I had the chance to produce a series of video clips and some online lectures on the fundamental concepts and knowledge on ecology and evolutionary biology. From the feedback of the audience, I've sort of compiled several points which might be important for us to figure out how to produce nature-related entertainment in mainstream media later. So here are the few points. A, random animal fun facts seem to always impress people for some reason. You know, like sloths only come down the trees once a week to poop. Or pandas are carnivores, but they aren't carnivores. Or sharks, they appear in the world before trees did in evolutionary history. This kind of fact may sound trivial to most scientists because it's just a one-liner and it has no depth. And most scientists would prefer to explain a whole series of evolutionary processes that might be a lot more interesting to them. But then explaining these things might be hard for people who don't know much about animals. And it often is to turn off and scare them away, and make them lose focus, and make them confused. So always try to spark interest with fun facts, and then maybe slowly open up to something that's related to the fact. Then you can explain more concepts about it. Second, no jargon. I know that it looks very obvious, but then scientists tend to forget about it because scientists use jargons a lot because A, everyone around knows what the jargons mean. And second, scientists always want to deliver their messages in the most concise and precise way possible, and jargons allow them to do it. However, they not only sound hard, they also scare people away, especially in Chinese. I figured whenever I talk about names for body parts or phenomena in ecology or behaviors or even just species names in Chinese, they tend to sound overly formal to the general audience. And they feel very distant from what I'm talking about. When they lose the connection, that defeats the whole purpose of trying to entertain them. So it's very important to cut down on the jargons to let them stay focused. Last, be light. Nobody wants to be lectured when all they're expecting is entertainment. So while we want them to have take-home messages, try to be light because we're aiming at the top of the funnel, awareness and interest. we can't be greedy and get conversion right away. So what I'll say is, let's try to entertain for the majority of the content, say 90%, and only keep around 10% of the content to be didactic or related to nature. That way we can connect to the audience more easily. For sure, the list would go on, and this is by no means exhaustive. And there are infinitely many ways to produce entertaining content related to nature. But that's not the point anyway. I want you guys to walk away today to remember the importance of entertainment in conservation. Because after all, the reason why we care about animals is because we love them. Thank you.